Hello, and welcome to Tales from the Shed. Sorry, I've just had a technology moment, but we're there now.
We're here. We're here.
So today I've been looking at a couple of bits and pieces, and I just came across this very interesting. It's called the IFD triangle, and it kind of reminded me of somebody I used to know years ago that used to drive me mad. So they were always going to be happy when. They're always going to be happy
at some point.
At some point. So when this has happened, when I get a new job, when
I'm in a relationship, leaves, when I'm not in a relationship.
But it was almost, just knowing them used to drive me nuts. And the trouble was, I used to believe them. And then after about 10 years, I just thought, I've heard this.
Oh, you've been going around this cycle a few times.
So when I heard this just recently, and it's this IFD triangle. So I stands for idealisation.
Right. Okay.
So when I get that job, I'll be happy. When I retire in 11 years, when I'm really, and I see this a lot because I say almost like, oh, when I can do this, when I get around to this, when I get married. Even though when I get divorced, when I get rid of this marriage, boy, things are gonna be just great.
When I win the lottery
over there, over there. But even if it's like win the lottery, that's one thing. But even if it's like retirement's definitely coming up in 15 years, you know, it's like. But in the meantime, you know, it'll be great. It'll be great. So you're living in this kind of misery and unhappiness. And I know I'm miserable to live with, and I know I'm really awful. But in 11, 15, 20 years, you watch me then.
It'll be fine.
You won't recognise me then, because I'll be okay. So we do this for a while, and amazingly, it doesn't work out very well. So we get to the F, the IF, which is frustration.
Oh, frustration. Right, okay.
Because you'll always come up short.
Yeah.
You're living in a whole psychology of more.
And even if you win the lottery, it's never enough.
It's never enough. So I've seen people that
I've won $1 million. If only it could have been two.
She won 5.
Yeah,
she's all right. I've only got 1. And I've seen people go, well, I have got some money in the bank, 100,000 in the bank. But what if what if the new roof costs 110,000? So they're living in this psychology of more. So because they're so used to the idealisation, you come up short.
But it is that kind of whole thing, isn't it? When you're at school, it's going to be okay when you leave school.
Yeah.
And then when you're at university, so it's going to be okay when you leave university, and then you find you have to get a job, but that's no good. So when you leave that job, then it's like you're
only in it for 40 years.
Oh, apparently.
Then you get something else.
Okay.
So you're really not ever prepared for the present moment. You're never living in the present moment, and because you don't live in the present moment and you don't see the present moment, you get really, really frustrated. It never happens.
And even if the thing that you thought you wanted happens, it's just never quite.
Well, if it does happen,
and it doesn't make you happy.
No, because I've got another wife, because I got married and I got another wife. But then I'm still not happy because perhaps when we retire, I haven't got that. So it's never going to really be there.
Yeah.
And then you get really frustrated about it, and then you become demoralized because you're really down and depressed. So when you're demoralized, what do?
I'll think of something.
I idealize.
If only when I get there.
So it's kind of like this idealization, frustration, demoralization, and it becomes a spiral. So we need a psychology of arriving, because this life is all you get. So one of the examples that was given is kind of like the Japanese tea ceremony. That it's not about drinking a cup of tea. So even when we're making a cup of tea, we're thinking, I'll put the kettle on, then I can get the tea. And then we're still even in this tiny space living in the future.
Yeah.
But the Japanese tea ceremony is about being in the moment of the tea, drinking the tea, tasting the tea, pouring the tea, and it's enjoying each moment as it happens.
So don't they grind it? Don't they have the tea leaves? They grind it, so you can't even just get the tea caddy.
No, the idea is, and you grind it and
God
you enjoy
forbid
it.
It's a tea bag.
And the idea is it's a very meditative process, which a lot of people do different things, like looking at leaves or walking around, but it is really enjoying the moment and being in that moment of arriving, that psychology of arriving. Goals are great, goals are good, goal is different, but you must live in the present. So the difference between a goal and an idealization is, a goal is something you get and you think, this is great, I'm here, I love it, and I've loved the journey, and I've noticed the journey, and I've enjoyed the journey, and I know where I'm going on my journey. And then, but if you're as idealization, even when you get to your goal, you think, well, what do I do now? You know, you're moving on, so you're always living in anticipation, and it's kind of not living in anticipation.
I think that's quite interesting, because I have this remembrance of, you know, and people kind of have said to me in the past, oh, you're quite driven, and and you've done such a lot, and you're always doing such a lot, and you're always so busy. And I'm kind of going, I'm just doing what I'm doing. It doesn't seem like that to me. But what I realized was, so for instance, it was like I did the, and I think it kind of got ramped up a bit when I started working in academia, because then they value the next qualification, So the degree is not enough. So you have to do the masters. So I did the masters, and then everything will be all right. And then as it happened, my whole life went to shit at that time. So that wasn't going to work. So I couldn't ever see, all right, the masters. And then it was like, oh yeah, and now I've got this. Oh yeah, I want another baby. Oh right, okay. And then I did that, and then all sorts of other things kind of happened, and then and now I'm gonna run a marathon. It was just like there was always something else to be doing, and I had another goal, but I never ever sat in
the now.
Oh my god. I mean, actually I did at one point sit in the now of running a marathon, and it took me 5.5 hours, and I just thought, this is really boring, and I don't want to ever do this again. Don't want to do this ever again.
No, that's
so that was actually quite good to kind of be in the moment of, because people kept saying, oh well, now I've done that one, you can do another one. I went, are you crazy? No. So, but I never celebrated when I was, and even when I got the goal, I never celebrated, because I thought, all right, tick that one off, I'm on to the next one. So what I thought interesting recently with my whole experience of starting the PhD and then deciding at some point I didn't want to do that anymore, and then submitting the MPhil and all the rest of it and going through that process, was it never felt, well, there was a moment when I thought, am I doing a PhD because I want to get a job here or wherever? And then it became, as I'd been in the process for 4 years, I thought, this is not going to happen. And actually, no, that's not, that those two things don't work together. If I'm not enjoying what I'm doing for the sake of itself, I need to stop doing it. And so that's what I did.
I think there's just that living in the moment. And on a smaller scale, I noticed it says, when you're having your first cup of coffee, are you thinking about your second?
Yes.
And I realized I was doing that, because I always had 2 cups in the morning. I was thinking, I'll have this one, and if I drink this one quickly, I've just got time. And you think, I'm having my second. When you order dinner, are you thinking about your dessert? And it's kind of like really making it small, because when I stopped actually doing that with a second coffee, and you think, where am I now in this one? And it's just taking that moment, and I just thought I'd put something slightly different in this, that I read, it must be from one of my Indian books, because it's a very that sort of way, and it says, patience. What do you need patience for? Are you waiting for something to happen? If so, stop it immediately. It is an utter waste of time. It implies that something in your mind is more important than where you are now. And this is plainly silly, as being where you are now is your life. And being in the here and now is the only reality there is. Everything else is mere fantasy. And I thought it just went with that idealization. So it's a little bit of the East and West, really. That the idealization and the frustration is very much keeping up on that. And then just that other patient of being patient. And I think patience is great and has a different thing, but I just like the way that it used the words.
It's just pointless to be.
It was like,
what are you waiting for?
What are you waiting
for happening?
It's plainly silly, because what you have now, and it was my first cup of coffee, is wonderful. Why am I thinking about when I'm going to fit the second one in?
But I think it is a bit like, so let's go back to menopause, I kind of think. And it is like we talk about So you're in perimenopause, you're in perimenopause, you're in perimenopause, and then there's a moment when it happens, and then you're postmenopausal and that kind of thing. So it's almost like we're waiting for, when we're in we're waiting for the next stage, waiting for the next stage. Well, actually, you just need to be in each moment as you're going along.
As you do. And I think it was just
like an avocado. That's the other thing. It's not ripe, it's not ripe, it's not ripe. It's ripe for a millisecond, and then it's gone. And then it's guacamole. So it's like,
So are you idealising? Do you look for that second coffee, or even worse, are you waiting for your divorce or you're married before you've even got up for the day? And if you aren't actually just loving the moment, loving the journey, just loving, this is just slightly crazy, whatever it is. And it's, is it that Japanese tea ceremony of enjoying each moment? And then if it isn't, you just get demoralized and go around again. So I would sit with the here and now. It doesn't mean, I think having goals is good. Idealizing is not good. Does that make sense?
So you can have a goal, but you have to look at, each moment of the how you get there is as important as the finish line.
Because what is it? Life is a journey. It's not about arriving, because then we're dead. Something like that. I can't remember.
I know. And it is that. I kind of feel like we are encouraged to think we're immortal and we're going to live forever and there'll always be tomorrow. But actually, I've done an exercise where you get people to say, well, what happens if the doctor gives you bad news, and it's like, and he goes back to, and what happens if you realize, and he says, oh, well, you only got a day, what would be important in that day? So it's almost like, and I know people talk about, live each day as if it's your last. I'm not going that quite far, but you have to be present.
I think it's being present
in that moment.
I think that fear of you've got to crush everything in it's not especially useful. But I think it is that there's a beauty to the journey. There's always a beauty to the life. There's a beauty to the now, and we take it for granted too much. And actually, what we think is important when we get there kind of isn't.
So so in the now.